This is Fam Electric Ghost, and we're live on the air with Bonnie Garvin. You're an award-winning author, playwright, um, writer. So I want to welcome you to Fam Electric Ghost podcast. How you doing tonight?
I'm doing well. Just one correction. I'm not technically an author. I mean,
Oh,
I've authored excellent essays, but I haven't authored a novel yet.
a novel. Okay.
Okay.
Well, you
Screenplays.
you're right. So
I'm
like,
writing, and that's
yeah,
exactly
I'm a
right.
songwriter, so I'm a writer in that way.
Okay, good. Good. You are a writer. That is a writer.
Yeah, it's a different type, but it's like a short form. I
Really
get it.
short. And
Yeah,
you know what? And a harder one because it's really synthesized in such a short amount
yeah.
of space.
It's like copywriting. Yeah. You write short little bits, skits
Yeah,
here and
I
there.
could see that.
Yeah, it's interesting. But yeah. Before we get into the heart of your story, I do ask every guest a couple questions, like of every guest on the show. What motivates you, and why do you do what you do?
Okay, so what motivates me is having a good time. And in this world we live in, oftentimes that's very difficult. So there's something really wonderful about going into my imagination and, sort of disappearing into another place.
Yeah, that's kind of like my the reason I like to play music because it brings me into another world. And then
Totally.
when you add like vocals on top, of like I like to play piano and bass guitar and guitar. But once you create music and then you write a story on it, then you have the ability to kind of build this thing that's multidimensional, right?
Exactly.
And that's what appeals to me I think it's just as a creative person is the world building that you build within a
Yes,
story, even if it's
that's
a
right.
short story,
It's
in the
really true.
characters that you build.
Absolutely. And it's funny because some years ago, I tried my hand at writing a song. And I wrote the lyrics, but I never really wrote the music. And I was having someone sort of explain to me even how I had no idea at all. I mean, this person's like, a professional teacher. And it was an amazing experience. I mean, I really, it's a real talent and skill. And, but it's the same in the sense of the escape part. Being
Yeah,
able to have fun, go somewhere else. I just wrote this thing for my Substack, which said that, I mean, particularly nowadays when everybody's so miserable, here's something that you can do all by yourself. It doesn't cost any money, right? You can
yeah,
entertain yourself. If I'm on a desert island, I'm still okay.
yeah. Well, I mean, that's why like a writing instrument like just an acoustic guitar, you can just entertain yourself forever with that, right?
It's really true.
And then today people can just like as poets. I started with poetry when I was a kid because I was really into William Blake. I really liked the
As a
songs of
kid,
Innocence
that's
and Experience.
unbelievable.
I just loved it, and I like Victorian poets like Wordsworth and Tennyson. And then I got into the Harlem Renaissance poets, but then I just got then I saw the parallels with like Dylan and like guys like Neil Young, and I got into the Beatles, and then I started saying it's important what you write when you write a song. Is that you could just say, well, how much is that doggy in a window?
Right.
Or you could write something like, like Dylan,
Right.
like blowing in the wind. It's like so you could
Right.
do something
Exactly.
heavy if you want to.
Exactly.
So like in terms of like tapping into creativity, what are your methods of doing that? How do you kind of what do you like recommend people like the entry point?
So I think that part of it is not overthinking what the entry point is, and
Mm-hmm.
it's just the doing. So that I can only give you an example, like for myself. So I've been writing for like 30 years now, teaching writing, but even people who are doing it a long time, like you feel stuck or you feel stale, let's say. And I read a book which I highly recommend, which is Patti Smith's. What's the one that, oh my God, Patti Smith, Just Kids. The story of when she and Robert Mapplethorpe, the famous photographer,
Yeah.
became friends in New York, and they were 16, 17 years old, and they would have some shitty day job. And then on the way home, they would, be on the subway and they'd find a bottle cap and they'd go home and they'd make something amazing out of it. And I
Yeah.
thought, I want to feel that again. I want to feel that excitement. And I didn't feel it with writing. So what I decided to do was to pick something completely different and just do it as a way to ignite my writing because I think things kind of feed each other.
Mm-hmm.
So I went through all the stuff and I considered going back to the piano because I played when I was a kid, but I knew I just didn't have discipline, but not that, that kind of
Yeah,
discipline.
that level. Yeah, you need a
Yeah.
certain level.
Yeah. And, the repetition and all that kind of stuff that one needs when they practice. So I thought, well, I've never taken an art class in my life. That's what I'm going to do. And I did it because honest to God, I went in there and I never had the slightest expectation, fantasy, or I just didn't care if I was good or not. I didn't think I'd be good.
Yeah. Well, that's a good place to start.
And it was really so liberating. And, I've been painting now. It's been like 10 years. And and I sell stuff. But to this day, cannot draw a straight line with a ruler. I mean,
that's
so I do have my limitation.
Yeah, well, there's different types of art because my daughter's a graphic artist, and she happens to be like a line, type of. She can do, graphite pencil, and then she can get into pastels. She's really precise, and she actually makes money. She's been getting her stuff into galleries and doing art direction. It's cool to be able to be an artist and actually do it as your career, and that's what she does.
Absolutely.
She totally does that at age 25, and I'm like, yes.
Amazing.
That was my goal, but to allow her to be able to do that because I still have like a day job, but my day job is like I'm a software designer, so it's still kind of in the arts in a way,
right?
But
so it's a creative.
It's still a creative space. It might be left brain, right brain a little bit.
But you know what? But that kind of stuff. That's the point, though, that it does feed itself. I mean, it's not, and that's what people don't realize. That you'll think, well, okay, well, I'm really crappy at doing music. Okay, then don't do music. Try something else. It doesn't mean that you wouldn't be good,
There's a lot of arts. Yeah, that's the thing, because the people, you need a permission structure. The problem is that what I loved is I'm a child of the 70s. And my permission structure, I grew up like with the greats, like the Hendrix and the Doors and Zeppelin and the Beatles. But then at the tail end of the 70s, I got into the punk aesthetic, like bands like The Clash, CBGBs, like you get like a Ramones, and the idea that you could not be perfect, right? Like Joe Strummer from The Clash is like, he doesn't have the pitch of a Robert Plant or anybody from Motown, but he had passion. And, you get a David Byrne from Talking Heads. You get quirky things that, that should be able to exist. And so the idea of the punk aesthetic was this idea, like, you can still do art if you're not like perfect pitch singer. You're not the best person on the guitar. You're not a virtuoso, but you could still write. And you gave a permission structure to a whole generation of artists. It's like, yeah, you can pick it up and you can like do what you can do with it. And that is because you're a human being, you're going to have a different perspective than anybody else. And that'll be your secret sauce.
That's okay. I can go now because you just sort of synthesized everything I was going to say, but it's absolutely true. I mean, and Joe Strummer was such a really great example of that. There's an amazing documentary I saw about him some years ago, and I wish I could remember.
I love his stuff. Like, I love the whole band, but
me too. I agree.
Just the idea that you have that heart, that he would go into it and it's like, yeah, I'm not like the guys in Yes. I'm not trying to do that, right? I'm not like Genesis. Like the Clash was never going to be that, but what they were is like this passion. Is like that kind of passion that you can like, oh wow, that means a whole generation of kids said, oh, I can be a Paul Westerberg from the Replacements. Like you can get all these other bands, the new wave happened. But the idea that you could have these different things, like Bowie gave people permission to have theater in music.
No, absolutely. There aren't any rules. I mean, and I think. And nowadays, I mean, it was true then, but it's even more so now because there are more venues open to people and it's more sort of, open to people. There really are no rules, and that people shouldn't try and define themselves by the rules. You should be whoever you are. And I mean, that should be what's liberating and fun about it.
Don't let the canon intimidate you.
No, but the funny thing is, I mean, oftentimes because I teach at USC and I teach screenwriting, so because it's a film school, I get a lot of students who then will want to say, I want to be the next Quentin Tarantino, and I always say, but that role's filled. Why do you want to be that? Why not be you? Because that is the only thing anyone has to bring to the table is just yourself. So don't try and be those other people. It's fine to use people for inspiration, and we all do that. But think about, what's going to make you happy. What is the way you want to tell a story?
Yeah, because I think we're all like every musician. They can tell you like I'm product of my influences. Whenever I interviewed people since like 2016, and anytime I ever got an artist that told me they really weren't influenced by somebody, it was kind of like a red flag. Because every artist has influences, and they might not be willing to tell me who they are. But when you tell me you don't have any influences, I'm like, you're just totally new. Like really? Like there's nothing
I
really.
think that's really about, I think that's more like an ego thing with them, that they
Yeah,
don't really want to say
who they
that
who is.
that they're so original that that no one is even, they're like a fresh,
Yeah,
drift of
but
snow.
nobody's exactly that. So if you're
And
more honest about it, then the people can kind of get, and
yeah,
then we either see it or they don't. It's like, wait, it's Lou Reed or it's Dylan or it's the Beatles.
right,
Like some people don't want to admit it. So, but the whole idea is like you synthesize stuff, right?
totally.
So you could be somebody like, oh, Orson Welles is the top. Citizen Kane, that's like the best. The third band, that's the. I want to be in that kind of zone. I love the camera angles. I love the way as an actor, like as a director, and then as an actor, the way he can just kill it. It's like, so yeah, you could want to be like that, but you're probably never going to hit the mark. But you could be inspired by it and then have something that's a little different. That's your edge. It's like, yeah,
Right,
you could be in that zone, but you have a different point of view.
completely. Yeah, and you're right. That's the only thing you've got going for you. I mean, that really is your superpower.
Yeah, and that's the hard thing because we're in a world like a clone culture world, like with AI and like in the music world. I'm totally kind of fed up in some ways. There's so many people use like samples, and I'm a player. Like so, I play piano, I play guitar, and people just like clone things. They just copy things with computers,
I
and
know.
then they say they're a musician, and like I look at like where's the guitar? Where's it? And it's like they just have a laptop, and I'm like, is that really a musician? Or are you a producer?
No, it's an amazing thing how I know that about music, that they exactly, and people actually believe somehow that they've created something.
Well,
But
you can
that's
create it, but whether or not it feels like anything that
right.
like Sun Ra or Miles Davis or Coltrane, it's like I'm sorry, but if you look at John Coltrane playing, or you look at Andy Duke Ellington, and you look at Stevie Wonder, it's like I know you could write something and you could put it out, but it's not gonna have that feel of a real
That's
human being playing the music, just like a real painter versus a AI prompt painting.
absolutely.
My daughter said I can smell it a mile away.
Oh, I'm sure for someone that's
AI
been
prompt
trained, yeah,
versus
yeah,
like a
yeah, I'm
real
sure that's true.
painter.
Of course, because it's that soul, it's that underbelly, the thing that you can't put your finger on that makes something special, right?
Yeah, and even the tech bros want to tell you that AI will eliminate the need for real musicians, for real painters, for real actors. Like, of course, because they want to make the money.
That's right.
Of course, they're going to tell you that, but that's never been the case, and it's not going to be the case.
God, I certainly hope not. It would be really depressing if it is, but
Well, it'll
yeah,
be junk food art.
yeah, it's exactly
Like
right.
if
It's,
you, if
it's
you want a
exactly
junk
what
food
it
piece
is.
of art, it's like your
No,
choice to buy the
yeah,
junk food art
yeah.
versus
No, it's really
like
true.
authentic art. Like you can always go get the fast food burger, or you can go to a 5-star restaurant and spend a lot of money for something. And people will go to the food truck. They'll go to the individual restaurant. And why do they do that? Why do they seek out that non-chain restaurant? Because that cook has that secret sauce.
That's right.
And I think people are always going to want that. They're not going to want the robot AI burger.
I
They're going to
don't. That's for sure.
want.
Well, you don't. That's for sure.
I
We got
don't
it's
want it,
our
but
job
maybe
to make sure. Yeah, that doesn't
the
happen.
people don't want
Right.
that.
Right.
Yeah. So I mean, it's like with all these tools today, you run into people saying, "Well, why don't I just like use AI prompts and write the novel that way?" Or write my all the work I do is like I can just do that. What do you tell somebody that tells you, well, that's their
I've
first
had people say that, but this is. I think if it's only about a paycheck and there's nothing else involved, then you probably should go use AI because it doesn't really matter to you because what you're looking for is something outside of that work. That work is like it's about money.
Hmm.
But if you really want to create something, that's a different thing. I mean,
Yeah,
that's
voice.
emotional. That's a voice. That's
Yeah,
you. It's your involvement. It's your imagination. Then it has a different kind of meaning to you, and you're going to treat it very differently. And if it, and if it doesn't work out, you're going to feel very differently about it than if it didn't work out, and that it was like cheating, and it was just this other thing. You're always
yeah.
going to give me,
Like crib notes, like,
yeah,
did you
yeah,
take the blue book? Did you have the little note tool
totally,
in your hand? Like, did
yes.
you actually use your creative capability, your critical thinking, or were you kind of have a little
Yes.
cheat sheet?
No, but it's a really, but I really believe that every time you do something, the next day you're better, the next day, because you've done it. It's like practicing, right? It
Yeah,
is the same thing.
10,000 hours
So
that it takes
you
to get
never, exactly, but you never get to that if you're using AI. How do you ever feel good about yourself and can't, like, I can look back at my earlier things and see the growth, and it
progression.
feels
Yeah,
good, and it feels like part of you. Otherwise, you're just calling it in. Why even get out of bed at that
well,
point?
my phone. The problem is like they got a whole generation that's getting been trained to phone it in
Yeah.
rather than be passionate about the craft. The one thing
Well,
about artists, no matter what
that's
type of
right.
art, is like from an actor to a painter to a photographer, whatever the art is, it's the hours they put in, that 10,000 hours, where it becomes like the muscle memory. When I see a musician, right,
Totally.
and I'm playing with somebody and I know they're a good musicians, like I don't got to tell them the key. The bass player will pick up on the key and I don't have to say it. And there's a lot of nonverbal communication in like jazz and kind of
Oh my God, I
experimental.
could really see that in
And
music.
we don't, and like if we see somebody comes up to us and they start asking us what the key is, I'm like, really? You don't know the key? You've been playing 20 years. You don't hear the key. You don't know it. So we kind of suspect like either that's a person that doesn't really trust
That's
themselves
right. That's right.
and
That's exactly
is
right.
asking because it's like a personality problem. But they
No,
actually
no,
do
but
know
it's
it.
true.
They do know it, but they're kind of scared to admit
Right.
they know it.
Yeah, no, I think it's absolutely true. And you never develop that if you don't really use it. I mean, that's how you get better. That is by, when I was studying the piano, it was true. Practice made perfect. And it really made a difference when I was really playing the scale and all of those things.
Yeah.
Muscle memory is huge. I mean, for writing, for, the art, everything. I mean, it's so important. And not only that, I mean, you really kind of deny yourself the full pleasure of it if you don't allow that.
Yeah. Like the whole thing with me is like people have to understand like when you start anything, you're going to make mistakes, right? You're going to have failures, or what we call happy accidents
What
in
we
the
call,
studio.
I call the vomit draft.
Yeah.
To be a
And
little more
sometimes,
graphic.
yeah. I mean, sometimes like it's like the third take versus the 100th take. Sometimes you go back and look at the third take, and you might have technical problems, but it's actually closer to a passionate moment that you can't recapture because you keep on trying to do something you're already away from that moment.
Yes.
So there's sometimes in art, is that brushstroke that you just put down, it's like in the moment, just like the note you put down or the vocal you put down. And I've talked to a lot of artists, it's like sometimes you can't replicate that moment. You can get close to it,
Yes, I
but you
agree.
can't get the exact moment. And sometimes that exact moment is actually okay if it's imperfect. It actually makes the piece better than you trying to wreck it by making it perfect.
Well, that is that happy accident things. Yeah, like I always talk about, like in writing, it's a vomit draft because the idea is that you just get out what's there. Think about it this way: if something's inside you, right, our creative self, it's all in there. We're this like intellectual, right, talking out of our heads, blah blah blah. But if something's in you, in order for you to see it, it has to come out, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So you got to get it on the page, and you begin to see with it, and then suddenly you think, "Oh my God, no, this isn't, I don't like this, but I really like this." Or I thought it was about Y, but it's really about B. So,
Yeah.
and that's part of the creative process, is finding it, letting it evolve, not expect. I mean, I find it such a relief to know that I don't have to do a perfect first draft, that it can be as
Yeah.
crappy as it can be, and I can go back and pick out. I mean,
Pick and
that,
choose
yeah,
the
exactly.
gems. A lot of times, like well, as artists, we'll put the multi-track down and just start recording. Just basically tape on. And with no expectation, just put down whatever comes to mind. Then you go back, you step away from it, you go back and listen to it, maybe not even the same day. You come
Yeah.
back and listen to it and you find the gems, you find the hooks, and it's like, hey, this works with this works with that. And so that by creating your kind of reference points and this like archive of stuff, that gives you less like pressure than saying trying to get the perfect thing down. If you just
That really makes
constantly
sense to me. Yes.
put stuff kind of in a stream of consciousness kind of flow state and then go back and rework it. And there's people like Frank Zappa, Neil Young, a lot of recording, famous people that's how they put things down. And then they went back and looked and then they pieced it together, which is like, typically what you've been describing. That's what you do.
Right. It really is. I was just thinking about, it's so true. The way you described it, though, is also really, it made me think about that, and that you can't do that if you're really in your head, because then you're in your way. You
get in the way.
What's interesting is, right? And you wreck it. It's part of the finding it, the treasure hunt is part of the fun, and I always find that that's what I really like most about writing, is that part that comes from the unconscious and is sort of finding what's there that you might not know.
Like a dream, like a waking dream. Like when you can kind of get into a flow state and kind of put that out, like you're saying, like you vomit it out, or you get it, if you free it from the inner child, you just put it out in the world.
Yes.
If we throw it at the wall, it's like a lot of things they throw at the wall. Like the problem is a lot of times you have judgment and you say, well, that's no good. And then if you're around these other artists, your drummer might say, well, that's the best thing I heard all day.
Yeah.
And you might say, well, I hate it. And then artists do that all the time. It's like there's
all the time
things where they say, well, this was terrible. And it's like, that's your best piece you ever did.
Well, I think also that flows in part from that when it comes the way you're talking about it, when it's done, there's part of you that doesn't trust it, because now, what is this thing that's taken on a life of its own and thinks it's going to go out in the world? I didn't have nothing to do with that. It's like that kind of feeling. Like,
you're like, oh, how did I do that?
Right, exactly.
Because Dylan had this conversation, and they asked him, can you do what you did like in the 60s? Could you do what you did in 68 and 67? He said, I can't even do it. I don't even know how I did it. Like he was being, they were asking about some of his the rhyme schemes he had, and he's like super literate. I mean, the way his songs are put together, and he won all kinds of awards,
right?
Because there's so much depth in the structure of his lyrics compared to most writers. You get Springsteen's kind of in his zone, but not in the zone. Not in the zone. So you're like, and he said, well, I can't even do it that way anymore. I do it a different way, but I can't actually bring back what was on Blonde, what was on some of these old records. He's like, I can't even recall that.
When you listen to something like Times They Are Changing, like just sit and listen to the words and think about you're listening to that song like 50 years later, and it's every bit as amazing and speaks exactly.
Dylan's like the roadmap.
I mean, you just really can't. It's just unbelievable, right? Yeah. And I'm sure, in a funny way, I think that the fame, the fortune, everybody telling you you're a genius, doing it so often, all of those things collude to where you can't get back to that other place that he was. Because he's not that person anymore.
Yeah, he's not that guy that did it when he was
not that guy.
He's where he is now, and I see some of the work he does now is still amazing. Right?
Absolutely,
so he's still brilliant. He's like blows most writers away, even when he thinks he's not as good as what he did 30, 40 years ago. But even the testimony that Hendrix used to be totally enamored with Dylan. And he tried to, a lot of his writing was totally influenced by Dylan's structure. And so Hendrix tried to emulate a lot of that writing in his work. He was inspired by it, and he would go on with everybody around him talking about how he thought Dylan was like the best writer ever. He was just going off with anybody who would listen. And I thought that was amazing to have this guy that's in a whole different zone as a guitar player, but he really enamored with Dylan's lyrics. And I said, well, that's cool. The fact that he was so influenced.
Yes, absolutely.
Because it's like if you get different, like you think he'd be talking about another guitar player, but he was talking about Dylan.
Yeah, it is. It's really interesting. I mean, I think that's probably my guess is you find that true for a lot of people.
Yeah, it's like the influence that they have might be totally not what you thought it would be.
Right.
You think it would be somebody in their same lane, and sometimes it's not the same lane, it's not the same area at all.
Yeah, absolutely.
So when it comes to like writing to like I don't know, represent your like reinvention or your true self, like do you find a lot of people like they come into writing because they're trying to reinvent who they are, or they're trying to get back to who they are?
That's an interesting question. I think most people come to writing because they've, if you traced it back when they were a kid, they had some interest in it, and then it got, and then they had to grow up and earn a living and all that. So I
Yeah,
think there's
in
some
the real
buried
world.
kind of thing there. And I think that, it feels maybe safer than picking up an instrument or doing other kind of things, even a paintbrush, because
Mhm.
at least we've all, I always say this to people when they say they can't write. I'll say, but that's insane. You realize how insane that is? You've been writing your whole life.
You had to write something to
You had to
get out
write
of school.
something, you
To
had
get
to
out of
sign
school.
this form to get into my class. You're literate. That's different. What people don't equate is that you can't write and are afraid of writing are two totally different things. The one
Mhm.
thing, it's like people always say, oh, I can't write dialogue. And I'll say, stop and think about that. How could that be possible? Since you were probably, that's all you've done since you're probably 18 months old. That's all you do. How is it not possible? So it's these ideas that we kind of create in our head. I might be able to do that. Oh, I can't do that. Oh, and they're not based in anything other than kind of our own
Like
fear
safety. I think
structure.
people are go for what's safe.
Yeah,
What's safe is to say, "Wait, I couldn't be Dylan. Like, I can't be Wordsworth. I can't be
right.
Blake. Can't be Shakespeare." So they put it on such a level. And so the whole thing with the artist said, "Why can't I pick up the guitar? Because I don't need to be Jimmy Page. I don't need to be Led Belly. I
That's right.
don't need to be
That is the
Van
difference.
Halen." And it's like you give yourself the permission to even pick it up. Where there's a lot of people, it's like I can't. It's like I go watch the concert with Eddie Van Halen, and I can't even imagine that I could pick up the guitar.
And therein
'Cause
lies the difference. So what people will do, and I will encourage people to do no matter what this is. I mean, in my case, I tell people if you're going to take a class and you're something interested in writing, then take my class because it's a different kind of class. If you don't want to take that kind of class because you want to paint or you want to go take another class, because one of the things that I think really helps is getting started. And there's something about having the, where you have to show up and you have to do something and you're with other people and they all feel like they're
like
scared, they don't know.
group
And they're so
therapy, like a group
it
group
is.
thing.
I'm really in favor of people taking classes. I don't care how good you are and knowledgeable you are. Sometimes you just need just that extra little bit of stimulation. It's not going to hurt you. I
No,
mean,
it's good.
you
It's
take it
good to
and you
kinda
don't do
kinda
it,
get
and then you
challenged.
don't do it. So if you to begin to find the other thing is, like I had someone in my so I do the storytelling lab, which is just a 6-week class. It's online, and I have people do different things rather than just the same thing every week. And in the course of it, we do this, tell the story graphically.
Mhm.
And one of my students who had never drawn anything, never had seen a graphic novel before I showed it to her, has now written a graphic novel on grief of all things.
Wow.
And
Like,
it
that
has
inspired.
already, I mean, which is in and of itself, just writing about like the heaviest subjects. I won't even go into how heavy this is. Written
Mm.
a graphic novel about it. And it's already a few weeks ago was featured she's in London, in the Times magazine, the Sunday magazine.
Oh, wow. So that went from not being able to do it to do it.
But the point of it is you don't know what you can do. She didn't
Yeah,
know. She'd never seen it. So our first reaction, if you've never done it, you go, I can't do that. You don't look at things and go, maybe I can do that.
yeah.
So the first thing is try it. And maybe you won't like that, but what you decided was you'd like the drawing, and what you're going to now go is take a class in storyboarding.
Mhm.
I mean, it
There's all
doesn't,
different levels, like you said, like
right.
the different levels. You might not be a good line artist, but you could be good at
Totally.
pastels and just paint strokes and doing kind of, you know, just experimental work, and it's like field-based work. It's like atmospheric musicians, right? They build atmospheric sounds,
Absolutely.
right? There's a level of electronic musician where you don't even have to know how to play the keyboard. Everything is just totally based on, modular synths. There are these
Right.
wires, look like there's all these complicated things, and people just build like based on sound design, taking sound waves and get them to sound like ocean, get them to sound like water, get them to sound like wood blocks, and then
That's why
throwing
by bed at night I have one of those little things
yeah,
that
the scenes.
sound like.
You just build these like sound paintings,
I
and you
love
can
them.
learn how to build a sound painting without having to know anything about scales, but you just like textures, and you start to learn how to put the textures together, and you can actually make a career of doing that without ever knowing how to play the piano or the bass or anything. But you get into the idea of the sound, and you get to be an expert at molding the sound wave. And so there's like people would say, "Well, I can't even do that unless I know how to play piano." Like, no, you don't. So there's different things you could get into that you could get real excited about.
No, exactly. You don't know what you don't know. So if you kind of start to open yourself up to saying, I'm not doing this because I now expect to, have a best-selling record, or I'm not doing this because I intend to have the best. I mean, it's great to have that goal, but
Yeah,
the first goal should be, I'm doing this because I really want to, and when I'm doing it, it's making me feel good.
yeah,
Otherwise,
the
what
big
is the
yeah.
point?
The art is like I think I feel it's like therapy for me because like I get through a lot of things that it's like cathartic. It's very cathartic.
Absolutely.
So I might sit at a piano for 2 hours putting things together, and it might not go anywhere. But the act of doing it calmed me down from maybe a day with somebody who's toxic at work, and I need to relax. So I just sit down and I just get into some mood music, and it calms me down. And so like the idea of like an art therapy where whatever kind of art you do, and I do it, maybe it's gonna go somewhere, maybe it doesn't, but at the moment it actually helped me calm down.
Well, here's the thing. I mean, all of us, and I think people really realize this during COVID. I mean, we've all been programmed to simply live to go to a job. And once we got off that treadmill and you start to think how totally insane it is that this is how life is lived, I think a lot of people decided to change and shake things up. And I think one of the ways to do that is to start doing exactly what you're talking about, and allowing yourself to carve out some space to do whatever that is, and see what comes out of it. Because who wants to live? I mean, I wasn't born to work. I mean, you just
Work
go
in
to
a
a
cube.
job.
Who wants to be in a cube all day?
Yeah, I just don't
Yeah,
want to live that way. I mean, and if you don't
yeah.
want to
I mean,
live
they
that
tell
way,
you that
you
that's
you
not the
do have
dream.
some control over it. Not a
Yeah,
lot. I mean, we understand everybody has to make a living. I'm not putting that down, but everybody can carve out some little bit of time for yourself, because you deserve that, and
well,
your
that's the
work.
thing about the
Everybody does.
kind of entrepreneurial spirit of being an artist. Like once you find passion in writing, you could find that actually is more satisfying than being, an accountant. Not that being an accountant is a bad job. It pays the bills, it pays the mortgage, it sends your kids to college. But
You
like
did pick the most boring occupation in the world, an accountant. Oh my God!
but you could get a lot of money. You could
You know
actually
what?
do
And my
pretty well.
accountant loves it.
Yeah,
He
he could be
loves being
very
an accountant. He'd rather be an accountant than a rock star.
yeah. If they like it, I mean, if you love it, that's fine. But if you're in a place where
Right.
like I actually wanted to write crime novels, but I was scared to pick up the crime novels, and I'm passionate about it, and I think I could actually have some ideas. And you got to give yourself like the permission structure to say, why not try it, right? Why not try to do that different thing? Because if you're passionate about it, you'll do it because you love it. If you do it because you love
Absolutely.
it, you're probably going to have a good. It will probably come out to be a good exercise because if you're not
Absolutely.
passionate about it, then other people aren't going to be passionate about it. But if you get passionate about something, it's like, law of attraction, it gets infectious.
No, it's absolutely true. And you
You
can
kind of
feel
got to
that in
believe in
people's
your
work.
story, right?
Yeah, I was gonna say, and you can feel that in people's work. You really can. I mean, you can tell when someone's really invested in it and when someone's calling it in.
Oh yeah. Like
Right?
why well do you want to go on Instagram and do another cat video and use the same song that everybody else has? Or do you actually want to do a post that is uniquely yours and maybe doesn't get the million views? But this is what people don't understand. It's like you could do a post and it doesn't hit a million views, but somebody sees it and then gives you an opportunity. So the number of opportunities doesn't always equal the number of views.
That is really true. That is really, really true. I mean, this is the thing. I mean, you don't know. Like, I go back to that thing, you don't know. All you can do, you can't control the universe. You don't know how many people are going to, what your video is going to look, come out like, or who's going to look. Or I had a movie once, it was about premiering in New York and it was 9/11. So needless to say, that didn't happen. You don't know it's going to happen. So you either enjoy the thing as it's happening, or there's no point to it really, because after you're done with it, you have no control.
Yeah. It's like if you're an author, right, and you give your book to the world, your readers kind of then own their interpretation.
That's exactly right.
And so you kind of have to live with the way, like you get it, put it in the world, and they're going to interpret the way they interpret. You have your vision, and you like, if they tell you they don't want you to kill the characters, like, well, the character's supposed to die, they're going to die. I mean, it's like they can tell you what they want. You don't always have to do exactly what they want. But
well,
it's like,
in Hollywood you do, but otherwise you don't.
yeah. Hollywood, if you're going that way, you got to keep them alive. You just bring them back again, or you bring them back
exactly.
in another timeline.
You got to bring them back, can you?
Or just bring them in a different timeline. It's like, well, I'm going to bring them back in a different timeline. I'm going to bring them back with a different actor and have the same story again from a different angle, and just keep on doing the same story over and over, which is boring. Which is why we wanted to see new ideas.
Exactly.
Because one of the fears I get with a lot of people is like all you see are remakes and people trying to build the same character over. It's like King Arthur.
I hate
some kind of biblical structure.
Yeah, we're now into this whole
Kurosawa. It's like people just repeating the same structures over and over. It's like, when are you going to come up with something different?
It's so interesting because the way, and you go through these phases, like now it's all about, ancient times and flying dragons from, sorcerers and medieval
Tolkien stuff over and over.
Oh my God.
It's like the Hobbit already exists. The Lord of the Rings already exists.
Oh,
so you're gonna run that again? Okay, I guess we're gonna run it again.
I know, it's really, but and sadly, this is where Hollywood killed itself. I mean, it just, committed suicide because it's enough is enough. You can't build an entire industry just on 5 franchises.
But they wanted to just like mine things, so they were mining like video games.
Right.
Now they're mining comic books.
Right.
And then they keep on reworking the same Star Wars idea over and over.
I know it. It's just
like it's like the same story. It's like I'm going through the tunnel to blow up the Death Star over and over and over in different angles.
Well, and I mean that's why people are now streaming, and why it's hurting the movie theaters, because people are sick of it.
Yeah, it's like they can't keep. It's like I try to tell people, it's like you get the same 10 producers using the same beats and the same synths and the same sound packs, and then music sounds the same. And then people say, "Well, that's what they want." Like, that's not what they want. Someone like one of the Gallagher brothers from Oasis said, like, when the business tells you that people just want to hear the same garbage over and over, did they tell the Beatles that? Did they tell Hendrix that? Did they tell Bowie that? Did they tell No, they didn't. It's like those people were unique, and the industry will take them and then clone them to death. So they're always hopeful that somebody comes, but they have a tendency to not.
Right.
They kind of push at them. Every innovative person that comes in has to fight like hell.
Oh, absolutely.
And it's not. It's like it's not easy because they don't want you to do something new. And you
that is for sure
to do the new thing.
Right? No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. I mean, that's a business of playing it safe and no one's looking for something new. And when something new happens, it's always kind of an accident that slips through, or something happens, or it was a hit somewhere else and then it's carried over. Listen, half the stuff that's on TV were original British shows that they've now just
they just like repeat
American shows
and don't do them as well.
yeah, and don't do them nearly as well.
That's why I watch a lot of K-drama. I watch a lot of Korean and a lot of Japanese TV because I lived in Japan for a while. And the one thing I like a lot about Asian TV is it uses a lot of kind of old mythology that I maybe don't know, right?
Huh.
And so it's interesting to me because I'm seeing things
Right.
that like there's a lot of mythology. There's like nine-tailed foxes. There's all this like a lot of spirit animals and a lot of fantasy that and they'll cross it in with some kind of fantasy from 3,000 years ago with something modern. So they'll have some kind of chaibal who's like, like a powerful rich person, right? But then it's like some spiritual thing and there's mysticism mixed in, which I'm like, oh, that I don't see anybody doing that here. It's like they don't.
That's a really good. You make a really good point, but I think that that's true in probably several different cultures where they tell stories differently. I mean, right? And that's so interesting to get a different perspective on how to tell a story. And
it just gives me a different frame, so it's not the same frame over and over. I get all kinds of weird mysticism going on with people like multiple lives, people with spirit animals, people coming from different, and then mixing it in with different times perspectives. And so like then you can get entertained because they've got these ideas that are not Western, they're Eastern.
Right.
So you probably don't know the history of it, so it seems new to you. So
yes, that's exactly right.
That's what's cool. And then it's like what's important, I think, in all art is to cross pollinate, to mix things.
Absolutely.
So you take crime, mix it with fiction, mix it with fantasy, mix it with romance. Or what if it's all of it? What if you have a little bit of everything and then you get something kind of new? Because you're putting different genres together and pulling maybe the best pieces and synthesizing something new.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That makes a lot of sense. And that's, I mean, and as I say, I think that the good news is that we're sort of living in a period of time when there's more, people are more open to doing that. Whereas before, I mean, that it's sort of broadened out the sphere of
what you can kind of like be in a lane. It's like, oh, I could write like a real life crime story and then suddenly go into fantasy and build this fantasy world. And I could cross genre, mix things together.
Well, it's funny because when you said that, it reminded me of a series that was done a long time ago, a very famous British series called The Singing Detective.
Mm.
And it was a serious story where then all of a sudden there's music. And then they tried to remake, and it was a huge hit on it's a television series in England. And then when they remade it with Steve Martin, but he who tried to do it seriously, it was like American Idol. They're like, no,
I don't get it. I don't get it. Yeah, well, the things that don't work or don't work, like I always like a big fan of like The Prisoner, McCullen and we're going.
Oh, the British one, The Prisoner.
Yeah, the original Prisoner.
Yeah.
Different, right? This idea that I'd never seen anybody execute that, and then nobody really repeated it.
Right.
And
that's good. That's a good thing.
It's a good thing. It's like when somebody might figure out, it's like, oh, well, I'm gonna try to bring that back.
Plus, why not just rerun it? That's
just rerun it. I want to watch the original. I always think the original is gonna be better.
Right, exactly.
That's the thing, is like when you got to get past like all this cloning and then get to the point of what do you have to say that will actually make somebody want to stay in the story. Like, how do you teach, like, that type of, like, people are so distracted today. Writers have, like, even more of a, I guess it would seem like they would have a harder time getting somebody pulled in to their story.
Yeah, I think, like, it's got to be something like, first of all, it has to start with, well, what do you care about? People, well, if they're kids, if you're really young, you don't really care about much. So then you've got to start to focus on, well, what does that mean to you? I mean, you're a person in the world. Do you care? What is the world saying to you? Do you feel comfortable in your skin? Is it about your sexuality? Is it about your race? Who are you in the world? You know, and what is that character? How does that play out?
And
I
speak
mean,
to them. Yeah,
right.
you
So
gotta
if
speak to
you,
the audience.
yeah, exactly. I mean, if you care about the environment, then start thinking in like, what do you care? What are you going to say about the environment, and who are you going to use that through? And what do you want to say? I mean, and how do you want to say it? And what's the best method for saying it? And because you're also not going to have you don't want a message movie or a message story. Maybe you do, but then if you do, then you want to write something that isn't fictional. So you've got to figure out where you begin to break it down. And rather than thinking you're going to come up with the perfect thing, just think about, I'm going to come up with a thing. There's
Yeah.
never a perfect, maybe you'll start it, and what you'll find is, it's not really that interesting to me, the climate. But what I really found interesting when I was seeing its effect on polar bears, and now I'm interested in polar bears. It's rather than seeing everything is, cause and effect exactly, and that maybe it's got broader implications. I mean, I only started writing because I literally went into the wrong class and ended up in a writing class. But I think the great thing about that, and that's what I really want to convey to people, is that's what's great. Why not do that? So you'll want to learn the class. If you don't, it's a good thing. It's not a bad thing. And if you don't like it, don't do it again. I mean, it's people put.
That's why you try something different. Like, if you know the road less traveled, like the reason like you go out like Jack Kerouac on the road is experience life because you don't know what's going to happen, right?
Right.
So, the reason I like to do jazz fusion is because I like to have the kind of danger of not knowing what the next note might be, right? And so if you have a situation where the song can evolve like any direction, then it gives you like you could be scared of that. A classical musician gets scared of that because they want to know.
Right. That's right.
But a fusion jazz musician kind of lives on the fact that
Not
I can change. Yeah, I can change it. I can have a set structure, but at any time I can make it go discordant. I can make it go into dissonance, and then I can bring it back. And I can bring it back anytime I want, and it's going to change every night. And it might have some core elements that stay the same, but a lot of it's going to be variable, and that's the fun. The fun of it is the fact that
I can see it would be, but it's also really scary. But that's what you want. You're wanting the danger. Otherwise, it's just boring, playing the exact same thing every day. And you hear people who are in the theater when you'll say to that actor, "How can you do it every day and every night the same play?" Blah blah. They go, "No, it's not the same play for me every day."
Because you're interpreting it a little different. How you carry. Actors will tell you like how I actually carry those lines off. If you actually watch me every night, I'm doing it a little different.
Right.
And like maybe you don't think so, but like if you really look at them, they do. And that's what most artists, that's what they do. Like unless they're about hitting the note exactly the same and getting fined like by James Brown if you don't. but a lot of artists are like, it's no fun. And for example, you say I can technically play my solo the same every night if I wanted to, but I don't. Because he said, when they asked him, I was like, why? Because it's not fun. And I'm not going to do it if it's not fun. And he was technically really good enough to do it, and he refused to do it. And so it's like, well, that's cool. I said, good for Frank. Because
I'm with you. I think
he did it the way he wanted.
And that's the thing, when you're an artist, you get to do it the way you want. So take advantage of that.
Yeah, I mean, that's the strong point that people got to understand. Is like, don't get yourself locked into a loop where you're going to have to do the same thing every night, every day.
Sounds
same
horrible.
Structure all the time. It's like, be willing to embrace a little danger, a little like feel a little less safe in the mundane. So phoning it in to me is not safe, because then I get bored, and if I get bored, then I'm not in a good place.
No, I'm with you. No, I'm like all things to avoid bored. I just don't understand why people want to be bored when there's so much opportunity to have fun and engage and really enrich your life.
Yeah. So, I mean, the idea of a lab is very, because I call my stuff like expansive sound experiment. So it's kind of laboratory in nature.
It is. I love that.
But the idea of having a lab, I think that's wonderful, because I think that's what you want. You want this kind of idea that you can have expansion, that you don't have limitations, that you can you know, have that mad scientist things like, well, I don't know what's going to happen when I put these
Yeah.
two things together. I don't know. Wait, is it going to blow up? Is it going to do this? Is it going to do? I don't know. Well, let's try it.
Yeah. That's what
So
makes it fun and interesting. I mean, I don't want to, I just, I was never someone that wanted to get up and like have every day be the same. I just,
yeah,
it's
I
not.
think it's awesome to give people that forum. I mean, to give people a space where they can feel safe in the space, maybe
Yes.
with other people that maybe are not so sure of themselves, to show everybody that, like, yeah, not everybody knows like everything about everything, and like you got to get trained. You got to get it's you have to go and try,
Gotta get your
uh,
feet wet. What's
get
going
your
to
feet wet.
happen? What's the
Yeah, the
worst thing that's going
newfound
to happen?
thing.
You're not going to like it and you won't do it anymore.
Well,
This
it's that
isn't
newfound sound and newfound thing, right? Like when you're on the search for the newfound thing, then life gets exciting. Then it's like worth getting up.
I agree. I agree. Oh my God. I really agree. It's really true.
Yeah, because like, people can put themselves into this thing where I don't even want to get up. Well, you kind of put yourself there. Like if you put yourself there because you don't give yourself permission structure for your imagination.
Right.
Your human brain has a massive capacity. If you think AI is smarter than you don't get it. Like you're always smarter than AI. The idea that AI is smarter than you is ridiculous. And people like they want to, the tech bros want to sell you that, but don't buy it.
No, absolutely. And I mean, it's all about in all the things that we're talking about. I mean, certainly in the arts, it's all about that human connection. And I mean, it's not gonna be the same.
That's what's good. It's like repeatable things are great if you want to sell a widget. If
Right.
you want to sell the fast food burger, having a repeatable process, that's great. But eventually you get burned out on that.
Yeah. And it's just,
And
yeah, I mean, why? Why just have the same thing every day? I
well,
know, but
some
there
people
are people that do. They just
they like
literally,
the safety of it. The
yeah.
safety of it, of knowing that I'm gonna get product X, and product X is always gonna be product X. But
And
like
that's
you like
okay. I mean, we don't want to, I mean, that's okay, but we would just like to encourage people to think just like a little bit. You don't have to go like hugely out of your comfort
yeah,
zone,
it's like
but a
watching
little
the
bit.
Twilight Zone or the Outer Limits. I never knew what the episode was gonna be about. The idea, like Rod Serling being able to sneak things in through
Yeah, he
science
was a
fiction,
master.
and Roddenberry the same way.
Yeah.
Guys like Rod Serling and Roddenberry could sneak morality tales into science fiction, which is what most science fiction authors have been doing since the beginning.
Right.
Is they sneak in these things with their dystopian and weird futuristic things that actually are things that happen in now, but they put it in
Oh,
these layers
absolutely.
and they hide it
Yeah.
a little bit, but it's not well hidden. It's there, and you're able to say things that maybe you couldn't say.
Well, and
It's not
that's one
so
of the other
cool.
purposes of art is to be able to say things that you might not be able to say outright, right?
Yeah,
So that's the reason people write music. It's the reason they write plays. It's the reason they write books. I mean, yeah, this is an opportunity for you to say what you have to say about the world that we're living in. What
yeah.
your
You don't
point
have
of
to be
view is.
direct. You're like a poet, like the Victorian poets were famous for having all these indirect ways of saying things, and from little death to all these other ideas. But
Right,
they could sneak things in the Victorian age. It's like, what are they talking about? It's like because they're not being direct. They're being indirect with allegory and all these like
right.
images, but you still can say it. And so this like you can get really creative on how you say it and what does it mean. You know, you get into philosophy, like and start to say like what's their world point of view. Well, that's where you start like why I do want to understand what other people's world points of view are, so I can see it's like is it the same as mine or is it different than mine, and maybe they see something a different way.
Well, that's the only way people really learn and grow, right? I mean, that's what that's all about. And I think that, that the arts, I'm going to turn on this light. It's suddenly gotten so dark. I think that, the arts is really, whether it's music, whether it's dance, whether it's stories, whether it's, whatever it is, are really an opportunity, to find that. And that's what they give us is that escape. Otherwise, your life is just a series of tasks. I don't want a life that's a series of tasks. I mean,
Yeah,
that's
that's
not,
boring. Just
yeah,
phoning it in. But
exactly.
also the idea of having a writing partner, because there's been famous partnerships in writing.
Very famous partnerships.
But the idea is like some people think they gotta do it all themselves. But the idea of like, oh, well, what if I actually worked as a collaborative effort? So
Yeah,
that you
I have
actually
I have
try
a
to
friend that had
partner
a very
you
successful collaborative effort. Yeah.
you help get people partnered up or to think about how they
No,
would
that's
do it?
really something you gotta kind of find on your own because it's like that chemistry is so it's like really like being it's like being married. It
Yeah,
really is. I mean,
yeah, it's like
maybe even more
songwriters, like
intense.
Lennon McCartney, like,
Yeah,
that's like being
exactly.
married.
Yeah. So I think you've got to really kind of find that on your own.
Yeah, yeah, I mean, it's something like you gotta be open to it because some people are kinda got ego.
Yes.
Like, some
Yes.
guys like, "I can't," like, I write the whole thing. And then you got other situations where you can have partnerships where
I think having a partnership sounds to me that sounds fantastic. I was really didn't want one at the beginning, and later in life, I've worked with people on a couple different things. I really like it. I think
the
it's
idea of it.
you're also trying to find the yin and the yang. You know, you want to
Yeah,
find the person that has your weakness. You know, because
yeah.
everyone's gonna
What
have
kind
something.
of builds these like when you have the duo
Right.
or you have the
Exactly.
collaborative writer, then it brings like it's more than the whole. It's like if you have somebody that a guy like Prince, who pretty much does it all himself, but
Right.
then he has to find people to actually play that live versus a band kind of like the Stones or the Beatles, that's kind of character based into the nature of the music. Like you have to have Keith Richards and Jagger.
Right.
Like they kind of go off of each other. They have totally different mindsets. But when they come together, they get this picture that separately when they write, it's not the same as a Stone song.
That's right. It's
But
really true.
when they come together and they write a Stone song, it's like wow. When they do it together, they get this. When they do it separate, they get that. It's like okay,
Yeah.
I can see it right there.
And you know what? And that's wonderful. So I mean, why not try it with some? Listen, if it doesn't work, it's like anything else. Then you won't keep doing it. But
Yeah,
maybe you'll find some nice synergy there, or it might motivate you to go in a direction you hadn't thought of before, or you just learned something from the other person.
I think you push each other. Like
Yes, I think
you kind
that's
of
good.
the comfort zones get pushed a little bit, and then sometimes where you have the fights because like, oh, you pushed me too far to this side, and then they get mad. It's like you pushed me too far to that side. I got mad. So then they got to come back to balance.
It's like a marriage, exactly.
Yeah, well, the thing about it, it's like the drama. Like the people like it because there's drama, and when you have that, there's chemistry. The chemistry doesn't
Yeah,
always come out in the right maybe best situation where there's like maybe there's a little bit of a fight, you know,
but
because
that all goes into it. It's
yeah,
just all part of the thing.
yeah, it's part of the whole thing because it's like life isn't always just one way.
No, it
It
isn't.
can be very stormy, and then the result can be like, wow, this thing that happened. It's like this energy, and like wow, like that. One of my bands, The Who, they always said was like four guys fighting against each other. How does that work? They're all kind of playing like they're soloing, but it
Right,
works.
right, right.
How does
Exactly.
that work when they're all kind of trying to blow up? And the one thing about the Who that was really dynamic, the original group, was they were all so dynamically kind of out of sync, but somehow it's synced,
Hmm.
and it's very unique in music where they're kind of all blowing up, but it works. And you're like, that it's like at the edge of a disaster. It's like all
Right,
the time.
right, 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 right. Oh, yeah. I never thought about it that way, but it's yeah.
Yeah, and sometimes there's things like that, like when it doesn't work forever because it didn't,
Right.
but there was a time period where it worked and it was brilliant, and it was like wow. And then you get the result of that, and it's like okay, that's the way things work sometimes.
Yeah. I mean, listen, people evolve, so the situation evolves, right?
Yeah, yeah. And sometimes you
And you
grow out
want
of
that,
it.
right? You don't
Yeah,
want to be stuck in one spot.
yeah. Sometimes you just gotta mature out of it, and it's like and you gotta realize sometimes there things are point in time. Sometimes some art like it's not gonna go forever.
Right.
Right? It might only work for that point in time where the two people are working on that and it works, and then they won't go their separate ways, and it's not
Yeah.
doesn't work
And that's
anymore.
okay. I mean, not everything has to have like so much energy and drama surrounding it. You know what I mean? Things you can
Yeah,
also allow yourself to experiment and find stuff.
yeah. I think it's super. super interesting to just like let it be. Kind of what the Beatles said.
Yes, exactly. That sounds like a familiar line.
Yeah, just let it be. It's like, well, what does that mean? It's like you let it happen. But so if people go to Storytelling Lab online, and that will be clickable, what do they find? There's a way to sign up with for those sessions?
Yes, you can sign up. What I do is, because there's only 6 people in each class, it's an intimate thing. So what I do is you sign up for a 15-minute free consult, so I can make sure that you understand kind of how the class, because I want people to understand exactly what it is. It isn't a traditional writing class. It goes on the philosophy that you can write, and I'm going to prove it to you. And now you're going to do all those different things that are going to show you that, yeah, you can do this thing. So all they have to do is, schedule 15 minutes freebie and see if it's what they're looking for. International, it's on Zoom and gets a really interesting mix of people, which is also really fun because it's not just all from one spot.
I think that's awesome that you open it up to that, because then that's a benefit in itself. I think people being able to interact, and this is why we do the podcast, because we get to talk to people all over the world. But I want to thank you.
No, I love that. Thank you.
Being a guest on a Family Life That Goes podcast. As I said, the storytellinglab.online is fully clickable. When the podcast is over, in the podcast description, we were just live on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch. We'll be on all the podcast platforms where you typically can listen or watch a podcast by tomorrow. Thank you again for being a guest on the Family Life That Goes podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Have a good night.
You too.